Итак, всем привет! Это, кстати, довольно-таки интересная платформа, где можно на раннем этапе приобрести криптовалюту GHC, Galaxy РОСТ. Это NFT, криптовалюта, которая сейчас на старте имеет даже изумительные показатели. Вы можете ее приобрести по сущим копейкам. Давайте подраскидаем вместе. Она имеет сейчас стоимость всего лишь 4 100-тысячных доллара. И у нее капитализация всего лишь, вот вы даже видите, не достигла даже 120 миллионов долларов. То есть ее будущее еще впереди. Она еще не залистена на Coinbase. Ее нету на Binance. И очень много будущих проектов, которые она будет продвигать, будет достигнуто вместе с ней. Вы можете сейчас инвестировать в нее и забыть на 2-3 года. Лично я приобрел почти 1 миллиард монет этой криптовалюты. И даже если она увеличится в показателях как Шиба Ину, я стану просто изумительно богатым миллионером. Давайте вспомним Шиба Ину. Ее максимум был от старта 85 миллионов процентов. То есть вы можете даже посчитать, если вы вложили бы 100 долларов, какую сумму вы бы в итоге получили. Это сумма космическая. И здесь точно так же. Вы сами знаете, что вам нужно делать.
Relatively unfamiliar with or new, and it's just an interesting activity, being a financial regulator and sitting in your chair. So, I mean, when you think about the technology and the challenges that poses, how do you go about the business of identifying and keeping your eye out for the risks, again, not just in the or associated with the product, but with the technology itself as it becomes either commoditized or infiltrates the traditional financial marketplace?
Well, again, we're for innovation. So really in more mature areas like use of the cloud or artificial intelligence, there continues to be challenges of how regulators look at those things. Does the cloud represent a higher degree of cyber risk? Is artificial intelligence, if you use it, do you perhaps violate concepts of fair lending or disparate impact that are concepts the CFPB has? So all these are questions that really need to be solved. So I consider that kind of the crypto's kind of the new thing. The core fintech are sort of established processes that have gotten to some stage of maturity, but still need increased level of maturity for regulation. So that's why in that report we kind of separated the two. One, we weren't finished with the digital asset work, so we weren't ready to publish on it. And two, those reports were Treasury recommendations. They weren't interagency, so we did sort of make an effort of triangulating with other regulators, but they were really our thoughts. We had the pen. So that's, so really the excluding digital assets from that report is just a matter of, if that report was a year from now, it would have been integrated. But I do think it's important to look at the nature of fintech, and these are fairly traditional, addressing fairly traditional financial services needs. It's sort of, in some ways, a disruptive marketing technique. It can be a disruptive credit analysis technique. Speed to market innovation can be quicker. But it's largely sort of overlapping with what we would all consider traditional financial services. Crypto, digital, blockchain technology is like a whole nother step. So I guess the first thing is to get the first phase right, and I think we put out a framework that we're moving forward on. I think on
China and the People's Bank of China have harnessed this and are ready to put it out there. There is concern that this could put the U.S. dollar into jeopardy.
What I would say to President Trump and Chairman Powell is we shouldn't paint all crypto with one broad brush. What I think you see in their comments is the kind of very general view that can crypto be used for illicit purposes? Can crypto be used for anonymous transactions? The U.S. should not take a blind eye and not recognize that not all of this is about those illicit use cases. And the reason why I think China is leaning in is because they see that future.
But China says that they could use their China coin to surpass or do a workaround the sanctions that the U.S. has put into place on certain countries.
And so I think you're right that part of the opportunity they see is how can they dislodge the U.S. dollar. What Ripple is trying to do isn't at all to compete with the U.S. dollar, to compete with really any fiat currency. We're simply trying to use our technologies and use the open source technology of the XRP ledger to reduce the frictions in these payments.
Well, to that end, when you're talking about the government, French Hill, a Republican from Arkansas, and Bill Foster, the Democrat from Illinois, both wrote a letter to the Federal Reserve saying, you guys better get on the ball here. This is important because we could lose our status eventually, or at least put the green back in jeopardy.
Right. And I think you are seeing some members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, and luckily this is a very bipartisan issue, that they see that the U.S. has been a leader in many technical revolutions. There's no reason why we shouldn't be here. And there are big issues at stake, including, as we're describing here, kind of, where does the U.S. dollar sit in the hierarchy of global currencies?
So 3 to 5 years is tricky. If you'd said 30 years, I think I'd give you a more accurate vision. I think 3 to 5 years has a lot of dependencies on, does our economy reopen in the next 6 months? What happens with the presidential election? What happens with China on various immediate issues of national security? So, but what I would say is, if you kind of assume a steady state on all of those things, what I think will happen is 3 to 5 years from now, I think banks will be connecting to blockchains the same way that they connect to SWIFT and ACH and other networks.
Right.
Once they do that, the nature of banking will begin to change, because while banking will always, I believe, be the key on-ramp and the key value-add service provider to people's financial services lives, they will not be the bottleneck of the transaction of financial services. Instead, they will be nodes on a network along with a lot of other nodes, many of which won't be banks. And that will really change, I think, and allow banks to focus on what they're best at and what we really need them to do. So I think that will happen for sure. I do think that in a world of geopolitical instability, crypto assets in general will grow and become a more significant part of people's lives. That's one of the reasons why, I believe Bitcoin prices are going up in an environment of perceived instability, as people start to believe that the sovereigns are, maybe not as trustworthy as they once were. Bitcoin is not generated by any sovereign. Maybe that's a thing to hang on to. So I think you'll see more of that. But over time, the world tends toward more stability, right? Things reach equilibriums. And so since decentralized things are more stable than centralized things, I would predict that the movement that started 200 years ago with the first Bank of the United States, a movement toward more decentralization, will continue. Banks will adapt to that. They will add value to that. And the world will go on. But it'll go on in a cheaper, faster, more accessible way than it has before. And that'll be through the good work of people like you. So that would be my view.
It's awesome. The money movement continues.
Customers. And so we're seeing more momentum than we've ever had around using XRP to move this liquidity around the world. And so we couldn't really be happier about how that has played out in a world where there's still a lot, I think, of FUD, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of doubt about what's going on in crypto. This is a real use case solving a real problem for real customers.
Okay, so which banks right now are actually using Ripple?
Well, we have signed up about over